My name is Alara, and I'm 28 years old. For the last 10 years, my life has been a repeating cycle of waking up before dawn, smelling of diner grease and cheap coffee, and handing over most of my paycheck to my parents. Last month, all that changed on a brightly lit stage in New York City. My parents and brother were watching on a live stream, laughing at the broken, worn-out shoes I was holding in my hands. A few moments later, the world's most famous shoe designer, Julian Croft, took a golden marker and signed those very shoes, turning my shame into a multi-million-dollar masterpiece right before their disbelieving eyes. What they didn't know was that this wasn't an accident. It was an ending they had written for themselves, and a beginning I had secretly been planning for months. If you've ever felt like your dreams were a joke to the people who should have been your biggest fans, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. And before I tell you how a pair of ruined shoes changed my entire world, please hit that like button and subscribe. You're going to want to see how this story of family, fashion, and sweet, sweet justice unfolds. Before that fateful trip to New York, my world was small and smelled of bleach. I worked the 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. shift at the Oak Valley Diner, a place where the clock seemed to have stopped in 1985. I was good at my job. I remembered regulars' orders, kept the coffee pots full, and could balance 4 plates on one arm. It paid the bills, or rather, it paid my family's bills. I lived at home with my parents, Richard and Carol, and my younger brother, Kevin, who at 26 considered day trading cryptocurrency a full-time job, despite it never seeming to generate any actual income. My room was in the basement. It was small, damp, and the single window looked out onto a concrete well filled with dead leaves. But half of that room was my sanctuary. It was my workshop. Tucked away behind a curtain were rolls of leather scraps I'd bought with saved tips, old shoe lasts I'd found at flea markets, and sketches, hundreds of them, of shoes. Shoes were my passion, my obsession, my silent rebellion. Since I was a little girl, I hadn't just wanted to wear beautiful shoes. I wanted to create them. I understood the architecture of a heel, the poetry of a perfectly curved arch, the way a shoe could change not just an outfit, but the way a person felt. This passion, however, was a long-running joke in my family. To them, my dream wasn't a dream. It was a silly hobby, a childish fantasy that I should have outgrown. "Still playing with your little shoes, Alara?" my father would ask, not unkindly, but with the weary condescension of a man who saw no value in anything that couldn't be quantified on a bank statement. My mother was worse. She saw my passion as an indictment of her own life, a foolish pursuit of art over practicality. "There's no money in that," she'd say, waving a dismissive hand. "You have a good, steady job at the diner. Why would you want to throw that away for a fantasy?" The good, steady job was a cage they had gilded for me. Every 2 weeks, I would cash my paycheck. I'd keep just enough for my car insurance, gas, and a tiny personal allowance for my design materials. The rest, often 70% of my income, went into a joint household account. This account was meant for the mortgage, utilities, and groceries. But somehow, it was always empty. It was drained by Kevin's can't-miss investment opportunities, which always seemed to miss, or my mother's new set of kitchen knives from a home shopping channel, or my father's upgraded golf clubs. I was not a daughter. I was a utility. I was the furnace that kept the house warm, the plumbing that never failed. They never asked me for money directly. Instead, they performed a carefully choreographed play of financial anxiety. My father would sigh heavily over the electric bill at the dinner table. My mother would lament how they might lose the house. Kevin would talk about the one piece of tech he needed to finally make it big. The unspoken solution was always the same: Alara's paycheck. This wasn't a new dynamic. It was a wound that had been festering since I graduated high school. I had been accepted into a prestigious design program in Philadelphia with a partial scholarship. My parents had promised to help with the rest of the tuition. I spent that summer working 2 jobs, saving every penny, my mind filled with visions of sketch pads and studio classes. A week before I was supposed to leave, my parents sat me down in the living room. My father couldn't meet my eye. "We had to use the money," my mother said, her voice laced with a strange mix of apology and defiance. Kevin? He had this incredible business idea, an online gaming service. He just needed a powerful new computer and some software to get it started. I stared at them, the acceptance letter feeling like a lead weight in my hand. "You used my college money for Kevin's video games?" "It's not for video games, Alara. It's an investment in his future," my father finally boomed, his guilt turning to anger. "You can always go to community college here, or just keep working. You're good at that." The gaming service never materialized. The powerful computer became a very expensive way for Kevin to play World of Warcraft in the room directly above my basement sanctuary. I never went to college. The fire in me dimmed, but it never went out. I channeled my broken heart and shattered dreams into my craft, teaching myself, sketching on napkins during my lunch break, and stitching leather late into the night. The ultimate symbol of my quiet defiance was the pair of shoes I wore every day. They were my own creation, a pair of ankle boots made from salvaged leather. They were imperfect, the stitching a little uneven, the soles worn thin from years of walking on the diner's unforgiving linoleum floors. But they were mine. My family hated them. They saw them as a mark of my failure, a constant reminder of the dream I refused to let die. Kevin called them my hobo shoes. My mother would cluck her tongue. "Honestly, Alara, what will people think? They're falling apart. You make enough money to buy a decent pair of shoes." She never understood that they were a decent pair of shoes. They were more than decent. They were my soul, molded into leather and thread. I had to believe that my life wouldn't always be this way, that one day someone would see the value in what I created. But as the years wore on, that hope began to feel as thin as the soles of my favorite boots, and I had no idea that a single online ad was about to put that hope and my family's greed to the ultimate test. The catalyst arrived on a Tuesday, disguised as a pop-up ad on a design blog I was scrolling through during my break. The letters seemed to hum with an electric energy that cut through the diner's stale air. Ascend, the Julian Croft National Design Competition. My heart stopped. Julian Croft wasn't just a designer. He was the designer. A legend. He had built a global empire on the idea that shoes were not accessories, but art. His work was innovative, audacious, and structurally brilliant. He was my idol, the person whose career I had studied with an almost religious devotion. The competition was a search for the next great American footwear designer. The grand prize wasn't just a check. It was a mentorship contract with Croft himself, a fully funded capsule collection, and a launch at New York Fashion Week. It was not just a door opening, it was a key to a universe I had only ever dreamed of. The deadline for online submissions was in 3 days. The prompt was simple. Submit one original design that tells a story. My hands shook as I read the requirements. I didn't have a polished prototype. I didn't have access to a professional photographer. All my best designs existed only on paper, stained with coffee rings and eraser marks. A wave of despair washed over me. It was impossible. How could a basement-dwelling diner waitress compete with professionally trained graduates from Fit and Parsons? I was about to close the tab when my eyes fell to the floor, to my own feet, to my worn, broken, beloved boots. A design that tells a story. My story was right there, on my feet. The scuffs on the toes were from years of kneeling to clean up spills. The softened leather around the ankle was from thousands of steps taken between the kitchen and booth number 7. The slightly uneven stitching was a testament to a self-taught artist, learning her craft by moonlight. A wild, terrifying idea took root. What if I submitted them? Not a sketch, not a prototype, but the real, lived-in article. I spent the next 2 days in a feverish haze. I used my meager savings to buy a high-quality camera lens for my old phone. I set up a makeshift photo studio in the basement, using white bed sheets and a desk lamp. I photographed my boots from every angle, capturing every flaw, every scar, every bit of their history. For the written portion, I poured my heart out. I didn't write about design theory. I wrote about resilience. I wrote about what it feels like to have a dream that everyone else calls a joke. I wrote about how these shoes were my proof that I was still standing, still walking, still creating. I hit submit at 2 a.m. on Thursday, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I didn't tell my family. There was no point. Their reaction was as predictable as the sunrise. When the confirmation email arrived a week later, I made the mistake of opening it at the kitchen table. "Dear Miss Vance," it began. "On behalf of the Ascend Competition Committee and Mr. Julian Croft, we are thrilled to inform you that you have been selected as one of 10 finalists." I must have made a sound, a small gasp, because my mother looked up from her magazine. "What is it?" I'm a finalist," I stammered, handing her my phone. "In that design competition." She squinted at the screen. "The shoe thing? Well, I'll be. They must be desperate for contestants this year." Kevin ambled into the kitchen, drawn by the sound of conversation. He peered over her shoulder. "A finalist? For those ugly things you wear? Did you send them a sob story to go with it?" "That's wonderful, honey," my father said as he walked in, his attempt at enthusiasm feeling hollow. "What do you win? A gift certificate?" "The winner gets a mentorship with Julian Croft," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "and a funded collection." The mood in the room shifted instantly. The air, once filled with casual disdain, was now thick with a new, sharper energy. It wasn't pride. It was calculation. I saw it in the way my father's eyes narrowed slightly, the way my mother's dismissive smile was replaced by a look of intense curiosity. Kevin just scoffed. "Yeah, right. Like you'd ever win." But his eyes were gleaming with a greedy light I knew all too well. The email stated that all finalists were required to present their designs in person to a panel of judges, including Julian Croft himself, in New York City in 3 weeks. The competition would cover the flight and 1 night in a hotel. For the first time, a tangible piece of my dream was within reach. It was a golden ticket, a chance to escape. But as I looked at the faces of my family, I felt a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. They didn't see a golden ticket. They saw a lottery ticket, and they were already deciding how to spend the winnings. The 3 weeks leading up to the competition were a masterclass in psychological warfare. My family's behavior morphed from casual neglect into a targeted campaign of sabotage, cloaked in the guise of helping. It started with money. The competition covered the basics, but I needed money for everything else. A decent outfit for the presentation, a portfolio case for my sketches, food, and transportation within the city. I had about $500 saved up, a secret stash of tips I'd hidden away for a true emergency. This, I decided, was that emergency. The first incident occurred a few days after the announcement. My father approached me while I was getting ready for work. He had a pained look on his face, the one he always used before delivering bad news that would somehow benefit him. "Alara," he began, "the property tax bill came. It's higher than we expected. Your mother and we're just a little short this month." He let the sentence hang in the air. I knew what he was asking. I thought of the new driver he'd bought for his golf set just last week. "How much are you short?" I asked, my voice tight. About 300, he said, not meeting my eye. I knew it was a lie. But the alternative, a week of suffocating guilt trips and passive-aggressive comments, was worse. That afternoon, I withdrew $300 from my savings and handed it to him. He took it with a relieved smile. "You're a good daughter, Alara. Always so responsible." The words felt like ash in my mouth. The second incident was Kevin's doing. I had my best sketches spread out on the small desk in my workshop, trying to decide which ones to include in my portfolio. I left for just a few minutes to get a glass of water. When I came back, Kevin was standing near the desk holding a can of soda. "Whoops," he said as the can slipped from his hand. A wave of dark, sticky liquid arced through the air, landing directly on a detailed drawing of a stiletto I was particularly proud of. He offered a clumsy, insincere apology. "It was an accident, sis. They're just drawings, right? You can do them again." My hands were shaking with fury as I blotted the sticky mess, but the drawing was ruined. There was no way to prove it was intentional, but I saw the flicker of satisfaction in his eyes before he turned and walked away. My mother's approach was more insidious. She began a campaign against my confidence. "Are you really going to wear that to New York?" she asked, eyeing the simple black dress I had bought at a thrift store. "It makes you look so plain, and your hair is a mess. You'll be on a stage with all those fashionable people. You don't want to embarrass the family, do you?" She would leave fashion magazines open on the kitchen counter, all featuring impossibly thin models in $1,000 outfits, a silent commentary on my inadequacy. She wasn't trying to help me. She was trying to make me feel so small that I wouldn't even have the courage to get on the plane. I tried to talk to them, to establish some boundaries. One evening, I sat them all down. "I need you to understand how important this is to me," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "The money I've saved is for the trip. I need it. And I need your support, not criticism." The reaction was a tidal wave of gaslighting. "Oh, Alara, don't be so sensitive," my mother said, placing a hand on her heart as if I had wounded her. "We're only trying to help you. We just want you to be prepared." My father chimed in. "We've always supported your hobby, haven't we? We let you use the basement." They twisted my plea for respect into an accusation of my ingratitude. I left the conversation feeling exhausted and more alone than ever. They were a team, united in their belief that I was the problem. The turning point, the moment of clarity, came from the most unexpected of sources. Maria, my boss at the diner. She was a tough, no-nonsense woman in her 60s who had owned the place for 40 years. She didn't say much, but she saw everything. A few days before my flight, she found me crying silently in the walk-in cooler, overwhelmed by the stress and the constant chipping away at my spirit. She didn't offer platitudes. She just stood there for a moment before speaking, her voice gruff but not unkind. "I've been watching you for 10 years, kid," she said. "I've seen you come in here dead on your feet after being up all night working on those shoes of yours, and I've heard the way your family talks to you when they call here, like you're their personal assistant." She paused, looking me straight in the eye. "Let me tell you something my mother told me. Family is supposed to be the anchor that holds you in a storm. They're not supposed to be the storm. Those people in that house, they're not your anchor. They're a weight around your neck, and they're trying to drown you." Her words hit me with the force of a physical blow. She had articulated the truth I had been too afraid to admit to myself. I wasn't being oversensitive. I wasn't being ungrateful. I was being systematically undermined by the very people who should have been my champions. Maria patted my shoulder awkwardly. "Go to New York," she said. "And don't you dare come back until you've shown them all what you're made of." That night, something shifted inside me. The desperation to win their approval, a hunger that had gnawed at me my entire life, finally began to recede. It was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't going to New York to make them proud. I was going for me. I was going to prove my own worth to myself. And as I packed my bag, placing my worn-out boots carefully inside, wrapped in soft cloth, I felt a flicker of a new, unfamiliar feeling. Freedom. I was just beginning to understand what Maria meant, but I had yet to experience the full, destructive force of the storm she had warned me about. The night before, my presentation was a blur of anxiety and adrenaline. The hotel the competition had provided was nicer than any place I had ever stayed, with crisp white sheets and a view of the glittering Manhattan skyline. But I couldn't enjoy it. I spent hours pacing the small room, rehearsing my speech, my stomach a tight knot of nerves. Around 10 p.m., I called home, partly out of a lingering sense of obligation and partly because I just needed to hear a familiar voice, even if it was a critical one. My mother answered, her voice loud and boisterous. "Alara, we were just talking about you." I could hear my father and Kevin laughing in the background. The sound wasn't warm or encouraging. It was sharp and mocking. It immediately set my teeth on edge. "I just wanted to check in," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "My presentation is tomorrow morning." "Oh, we know. We're having a little viewing party," my mother announced. "The neighbors are coming over. We'll all watch the live stream." It's not every day our daughter gets to be on a fancy New York stage. Her tone was syrupy sweet, but there was a strange undercurrent I couldn't place. It felt like she was the host of a comedy roast, and I was the main course. "That's nice of you," I said, confused. "Well, break a leg, sweetie," she chirped. "Don't trip on those awful shoes of yours." More laughter erupted in the background before she hung up. The call left me feeling unsettled and deeply uneasy. Why would they invite the neighbors? They had never shown an ounce of pride in my work before. It felt less like a gesture of support and more like they were setting the stage for a public humiliation. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was just paranoid from the stress. I laid out my thrift store dress, polished my worn boots one last time, and tried to get some sleep. I woke up hours before my alarm, my mind racing. I decided to get some fresh air. As I was heading out of my room, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. The message was simple. "I used to work with your dad. He's a jerk. You should know what they're really up to. Check Kevin's Facebook page. Good luck tomorrow." My blood ran cold. With trembling hands, I opened the Facebook app and navigated to my brother's profile. It was public, and there it was, a post from an hour ago. It was a picture of him, my parents, and several of their friends crowded into our living room, all raising glasses and grinning at the camera. The caption read, "Getting ready for the big show tomorrow. My sister is a finalist in some design contest. Taking bets on how long it takes for her to burst into tears on stage. I've got $50 on under 2 minutes. Number family support, number fashion victim." I scrolled down, my stomach churning. The comments were a sea of laughing emojis and cruel jokes from their friends. "Tell her not to quit her day job," one read. "Are those the busted-up shoes she always wears?" "LOL," read another. But the worst comment came from my own father. Underneath Kevin's post, he had written, "I'll take that bet. But the real entertainment will be when she comes home with nothing and finally has to get serious about her life. At least then this whole silly shoe fantasy will be over for good." I sank onto the hotel room floor, the phone slipping from my grasp. The air left my lungs in a silent scream. This was the viewing party. It wasn't a celebration. It was a spectacle. They had gathered an audience to watch me fail. They weren't just unsupportive. They were actively, eagerly betting against me. They wanted me to be humiliated. In their narrative, my failure was the necessary catalyst for me to finally become the person they wanted me to be. The dutiful, dreamless daughter who knew her place. The casual cruelty, the public nature of it, the glee they took in my potential pain. It was the final, devastating blow. It shattered the last vestiges of hope I had for our relationship. All the years of being their ATM, all the dismissive comments, all the sabotage, it all clicked into place. They didn't see me. They had never seen me. They only saw a reflection of their own disappointments and a resource to be exploited. In that sterile, anonymous hotel room, thousands of miles from the basement that had been both my prison and my sanctuary, I felt a lifetime of hurt coalesce into a single, sharp point of clarity. Maria was right. They weren't my anchor. They were the storm, and I had been letting them drown me for far too long. A strange calm washed over me. The fear of what they thought, a fear that had dictated so many of my choices, simply evaporated. It no longer mattered. They had shown me their truth. Now it was time for me to show them mine. For a long moment, I just sat there on the plush hotel carpet, the cruel words from the Facebook post burning behind my eyes. The old Alara would have dissolved into tears. She would have called them, begging for an explanation, only to be met with more gaslighting. The old Alara might have even considered not showing up to the competition at all, succumbing to the humiliation they had so carefully orchestrated. But I wasn't the old Alara anymore. Their betrayal hadn't just broken my heart. It had forged it into something harder, something sharper. I stood up, walked over to the desk, and opened my laptop. The screen flickered to life, showing the login page for a private, invitation-only design forum called The Last Stitch. This was my true sanctuary, a place far away from my family's ridicule. And this was the home of my secret weapon. For the past 6 months, I had been part of a small, anonymous mentorship group on the forum. I had been discovered after a post on my obscure design blog, where I documented my process of making my boots went viral within a tiny niche of couture craftsmen. One of them had invited me to the forum. There, I had been paired with a mentor, someone who went only by the initials JC. JC was brilliant, his critiques insightful and his encouragement unwavering. He saw things in my sketches that no one else did. He pushed me to refine my techniques, to think not just as a craftsman, but as an artist. He was the one who told me about the Ascend competition. "Your work has a soul, Alara," he had written in one of our first exchanges. "The world needs to see it. This competition is your stage." He knew about my family. I had confessed my situation in a moment of despair, telling him about the constant criticism and lack of support. His response had been simple and profound. "Let their noise be the wind that pushes your sails. Use it." I typed a new message to him, my fingers flying across the keyboard. "JC, you're not going to believe what they did." I sent him the screenshot of Kevin's Facebook post. His reply came back almost instantly. "I believe it, Alara. This is the final push. They have given you the heart of your story. Don't tell the judges about your technique. Tell them about this. Tell them why those shoes on your feet are not just leather and thread, but a testament to survival. I will be there. You are not alone." Reading his words, I felt a surge of power. He was right. My family hadn't written my humiliation. They had written my anthem. They had handed me the raw, emotional core of my presentation. My plan, which had been a nervous recitation of design choices, was now scrapped. A new plan formed in my mind, clear and precise. I wasn't just going to present a pair of shoes. I was going to present my soul. And then I did something else. I remembered my dad's comment. "The real entertainment will be when she comes home with nothing." The word nothing echoed in my head. They were so certain, so arrogant. That certainty was their weakness. I pulled out my phone and made a call. Not to my family, but to Maria at the diner. "Maria, it's Alara," I said, my voice firm. I have a strange favor to ask. Do you still have the number for that real estate agent who comes in for breakfast on Wednesdays? The one who handles rentals? Maria, without asking a single question, gave me the number. I left a message for the agent, explaining my situation briefly and asking her to start looking for a small, one-bedroom apartment for me, effective immediately. I had my secret savings, the $200 that my father hadn't taken, and I would have my next paycheck from the diner. It wouldn't be much, but it would be a start. It was a declaration of independence that no one but me would hear until the time was right. Then came the final piece of the plan. A new message from JC popped up on my screen. One more thing. My real name is Julian Croft. I started this forum to find raw, undiscovered talent away from the noise of the industry. I am not just a judge tomorrow, Elara. I am your advocate. Do not hold back. I stared at the screen, my mind reeling. JC was Julian Croft, my mentor, my anonymous champion. The man who had given me the courage to even be here was the very legend I had come to impress. He hadn't just discovered me. He had been cultivating my talent in secret. The competition wasn't a long shot. It was a carefully constructed stage, built just for me. He knew my work. He knew my story. He knew my family. This wasn't a competition anymore. It was a coronation. A slow smile spread across my face. My family was gathered in our living room, eagerly anticipating a train wreck. They had no idea the train was about to hit them. I closed my laptop. The fear was gone, replaced by an icy calm. I knew exactly what I had to do. I would walk onto that stage, hold up my broken shoes, and tell the entire world the truth. The backstage area of the competition was a chaotic symphony of nervous energy. Designers fussed over pristine, jewel-encrusted creations. Models in 6-inch heels teetered by. And then there was me, in my $10 black dress, holding a pair of worn-out leather boots that looked like they had been pulled from a dumpster. I should have felt out of place, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I could feel the weight of my family's eyes on me, even from 1,000 miles away, through the lens of a camera. I pictured them on the couch, leaning forward, hungry for my failure. The thought didn't intimidate me. It fueled me. When my name was called, a hush fell over the auditorium. I walked to the center of the stage, into a pool of brilliant white light. In the front row sat the judges, and in the center, looking at me with a calm, encouraging expression, was Julian Croft. I took a deep breath, held my boots up for the cameras, and began. My design is called The Survivor, I said, my voice clear and steady, echoing through the silent hall. These are not a prototype. They are the finished product. I have worn them every day for 4 years. They were born in a damp basement, stitched together late at night, long after my shifts at a local diner ended. I paused, letting the words sink in. Many designers are inspired by art, by architecture, by nature. I was inspired by a different question. How much weight can a dream carry before it breaks? I told them everything. I didn't mention my family by name, but I didn't have to. I spoke of a chorus of critics who called my passion a silly hobby. I described the constant pressure to give up, to be practical, to shrink myself to fit into a box that was never meant for me. Every scuff on this toe, I said, pointing to a deep gash in the leather, is a dismissive comment I absorbed. Every worn patch on this heel is a dream they tried to take from me. The uneven stitching is a testament to an artist with no teachers, no resources, only a relentless, stubborn belief in her own voice. The auditorium was utterly silent. The judges were leaning forward, captivated. I could feel the shift in the energy, from polite interest to raw emotional connection. These shoes, I said, my voice thick with emotion, are not broken. They are proof. They are proof that you can be weighed down, you can be underestimated, and you can be told you are worthless, but you can still stand. You can still walk forward. This design is not about fashion. It is about resilience. I finished, my heart pounding. A long, profound silence held the room. Then, Julian Croft stood up. The camera zoomed in on him as he walked onto the stage toward me. My family, at home, must have been in shock. This was not part of their script. He took the shoes from my hands, holding them with a reverence that made my breath catch. "In my 30 years in this industry," he said, his voice amplified by the microphone on his lapel, "I have seen thousands of beautiful shoes, but I have rarely seen shoes with this much honesty, this much soul." He turned to the audience. "We look for designers who can create beauty, but true genius, true art, comes from designers who can translate their pain, their struggle, their life, into something that moves us. Alara Vance has not just designed a shoe, she has given us her story." Then, he did something that no one could have predicted. He beckoned an assistant, who rushed onto the stage with a small velvet box. Julian opened it. Inside was a single, shimmering golden marker. "A product is temporary," Julian said, looking directly into the main camera, as if speaking to my family. "But art is eternal. And sometimes, art is found in the most broken of places." He took the marker, uncapped it, and with a steady hand, he signed his iconic, flowing signature right across the side of my worn-out boot. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. He held it up for everyone to see. "This shoe, as it is, will be the centerpiece of the new Croft campaign. And this signature," he said, "is not just an autograph. It is a valuation. There are collectors who would pay millions for a one-of-a-kind signed piece of my history. But this is more than that. This is the beginning of Alara's history." He turned to me, his eyes shining. "Alara, the mentorship and the funded collection are yours. But I want to offer you something more. I am offering you a position as the head designer of a new experimental line at Croft Industries. A multi-million-dollar contract. We are not just going to make your shoes. We are going to build an empire together, based on your story." The auditorium erupted in thunderous applause. I stood there, stunned, tears streaming down my face, not tears of humiliation, but tears of pure, unadulterated triumph. I looked at the camera, a wide, genuine smile spreading across my face for the first time in years. I pictured my family in the living room. The betting was over. The laughing had stopped. Their silly hobby, their pathetic, broken shoes, had just become a legend, and their cash cow had just walked out of the pasture for good. The moments after the announcement were a surreal whirlwind. I was swept backstage into a flurry of flashbulbs, reporters shouting questions, and well-dressed people shaking my hand. Julian Croft's team formed a protective circle around me, guiding me through the chaos. One of them, a sharp woman named Isabel who introduced herself as my new point of contact, handed me a bottle of water and a new, fully charged phone. "Mr. Croft anticipated you might need this," she said with a knowing smile. "Your old one is probably busy." It was an understatement. When I finally had a moment alone in a quiet dressing room, I looked at my old phone. It was practically vibrating itself to death. 112 missed calls. Dozens of texts. Most were from my parents and Kevin. "Mom, Alara, call me right now. We need to talk." "Dad, what was that? A contract? Is that real?" Kevin, holy. "Alara, millions? Dude, we're rich." "Mom, Alara, this is your mother. I am not kidding. Pick up the phone. The neighbors are asking questions." The whiplash in their tone was almost comical. The mockery from the night before had vanished, replaced by a desperate, greedy urgency. Kevin's message, "We're rich," told me everything I needed to know. In their minds, my victory was their lottery win. I turned the old phone off and dropped it in my purse. I turned on the new one. The first message was from Maria. "Atta girl. I'm putting a help wanted sign in the window." The second was from the real estate agent. "Just saw the news. Congratulations. I have 3 potential apartments for you to look at via virtual tour tomorrow. All well within your new budget, I imagine." And I was whisked away from the venue in a black town car. Not to the modest hotel from the night before, but to a suite at the plaza overlooking Central Park. The signed shoes were carefully packed away by a security team. "They're being taken to the Croft archives for preservation," Isabel explained. "They're priceless now." That night, I sat on a silk chaise lounge, wearing a plush hotel robe, and stared out at the city lights. It felt like a dream. Just 24 hours ago, I had been on the floor of a budget hotel room, heartbroken and humiliated. Now, I was in a palace, my future rewritten. The sense of freedom was dizzying, overwhelming. I wasn't just free from my basement workshop. I was free from their expectations, their judgment, their constant crushing weight. For the first time, I could breathe. I ordered room service, the most expensive thing on the menu, and ate it in bed while watching a classic movie. I fell asleep without the familiar scent of diner grease in my hair. And I didn't dream of shoes. I dreamt of nothing at all. Meanwhile, back in Oak Valley, the fallout was beginning. According to the text from my dad's former coworker, the one who had tipped me off, the viewing party had ended in stunned, awkward silence. The neighbors, who had come for a laugh, were now congratulating my parents with a new, curious respect. My family, caught completely off guard, had no narrative to spin. Their daughter, the failure, the joke, was suddenly a local hero, a Cinderella story splashed across national news websites. Their power over me had been rooted in a single belief, that I needed them more than they needed me. They believed my dream was worthless, and that I would eventually have to come crawling back to the safety of my diner job and my role as the family financier. Julian Croft hadn't just signed my shoes. He had publicly validated my dream, and in doing so, he had shattered the foundation of their control. The next morning, when they woke up, their cash cow was gone, the furnace was off, and the house was very, very cold. They were finally on their own, and I suspected they had absolutely no idea how to handle it. 1 year, 365 days. It sounds like a long time when you're counting down shifts at a diner, but from the vantage point of my new life, it passed in a creative, exhilarating flash. The person I am today is a universe away from the girl who stitched shoes in a damp basement, and my life is a landscape I designed myself, built on a foundation of self-respect I never knew I had. I live in a sun-drenched loft in Soho now, the kind of place I used to tear out of magazines with a wistful sigh. One entire wall is a grid of enormous industrial windows that flood the space with light and offer a panoramic view of the city that became my salvation. The other half of the loft is my studio. It's a space of glorious, organized chaos, filled with the rich, intoxicating scent of high-quality Italian leather, the soft whir of professional-grade stitching machines, and the palpable energy of creation. There are no curtains to hide behind, no concrete wells filled with dead leaves. There is only light and possibility. The experimental line at Croft Industries, which we officially named Survivor, launched with a thunderous wave of critical and commercial success. Julian, true to his word, had given me complete creative control. He wanted my voice, unfiltered and raw. The centerpiece of our entire global marketing campaign was, of course, the story of my original boots. We didn't hide their flaws. We magnified them. Billboards in Times Square in Tokyo showed close-up shots of the scuffed leather and uneven stitching, with the simple tagline, Every scar tells a story. The first collection, inspired by the Japanese art of kintsugi, the practice of repairing broken pottery with gold lacquer, making it more beautiful for having been broken, sold out worldwide in less than 24 hours. I was no longer just a designer. I was the creative director of my own brand. My days are now filled with things I never thought I'd experience. Leading a small, brilliant team of young designers who actually listen to my ideas, flying to Florence to hand-select leather from centuries-old tanneries, and watching my sketches transform into tangible, beautiful art. Julian remained my staunchest advocate and mentor. "Never let them sand down your edges, Ilara," he told me once, over an espresso in Milan. "Your imperfections are your signature. That's what makes your work breathe." He had given me the resources to build my dream, but more importantly, he had given me the permission to be myself. But what about the family I left behind? That story is more complex. I didn't cut them off completely. In my newfound strength, that felt like an act of fear, not power. Instead, I chose to redefine the terms of our relationship, to drain it of its toxicity and see what, if anything, remained. For the first month after the competition, my old phone, which I kept in a drawer, was a testament to their spiraling panic. They went through every stage of manipulation. Love bombing. "We are so proud of you, honey. We always knew you had it in you." Guilt tripping. "Your mother hasn't been able to sleep. She's so worried about you." And finally, poorly veiled demands. "We think it's only fair that the family gets a share for supporting your hobby all these years." When it became clear I wouldn't respond to their chaos, I had Isabel, my new chief of staff, send them a formal, neutrally worded letter. It stated my willingness to open a line of communication, with one non-negotiable condition. It would take place only in a professionally moderated environment. I would pay for a series of family therapy sessions. They agreed almost immediately, a fact I now realize was because they saw it as a business negotiation, not a chance for healing. The first session, conducted over a video call, was a spectacular train wreck that validated every painful choice I had made. They appeared on screen together, a united front, with my mother smiling a tight, rehearsed smile. They launched into a speech about how my success was a family victory and how they were my launching pad. Then, the real agenda emerged. "So, Ilara," my father said, leaning into the camera with an air of patriarchal authority, "your mother and I, and Kevin, of course, have been thinking. This contract with Croft is substantial. We think a 20% familial management fee would be appropriate to compensate us for our investment in you over the years. And I've got this new app idea," Kevin interjected, his eyes gleaming with that familiar, unearned confidence. "It's like Uber, but for dog walkers. It's a guaranteed unicorn, with a small seed investment from you. Say, $500,000, we'd all be billionaires in a year." I listened without saying a word, a profound and sorrowful calm settling over me. The therapist, a patient woman named Dr. Aylin, finally turned to me. "Ilara, how does hearing this make you feel?" I took a breath. "It makes me feel like I'm at the diner again," I said quietly. "And you're all looking at the menu, deciding what you want to order and just assuming I'll be the one to pay the bill." Ugh. Then I shared my screen. The first thing I displayed was the high-resolution screenshot of Kevin's Facebook post, with my father's cruel comment highlighted in red. I read it aloud. "The real entertainment will be when she comes home with nothing and finally has to get serious about her life." I then shared archived bank statements, showing years of my paychecks being deposited into their account and immediately drained. Finally, I told the story of my stolen college fund. For the first time in their lives, they were confronted with the undeniable, documented truth of their actions, with no room to gaslight or change the subject. A neutral third party was witnessing it all. The effect was immediate and explosive. My father's face turned a deep, mottled red. He started shouting about disrespect and ingratitude, about how I was airing our private family business to a stranger, before abruptly ending his video call. Kevin just stared, sullen and defeated, before muttering something about me being a sellout and disconnecting. But my mother, she just sat there. The rehearsed smile was gone, replaced by a pale, slack-jawed expression of shock. For the first time, I think she saw the cumulative ugliness of their behavior laid bare. I saw the armor crack. She stayed on the call, and she agreed to continue the sessions alone. Over the next few months, we peeled back the layers. She talked about her own abandoned dreams of being a painter, and how seeing my passion had been a painful reminder of what she had given up. It wasn't an excuse, but it was a reason. It was the beginning of a painful, fragile honesty. The financial reckoning came, as I knew it would. About 6 months after I left, my mother called me, weeping. The bank had started foreclosure proceedings on the house. Their lifetime of financial irresponsibility, propped up for the last decade by my income, had finally brought the walls crumbling down. "You have to help us, Ilara," she cried. "They're going to take our home. After everything we've done for you." The old me would have caved. The old me would have written a check just to stop the pain and guilt. But the new me knew that money was a bandage, not a cure. "I will not give you money," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "That will not solve the problem, but I will give you a tool." I paid for 10 sessions with a highly recommended financial advisor and debt counselor in their town. "He can help you create a budget, negotiate with the bank, and learn to live within your means," I told her. "Whether you use his help is your choice." It was the ultimate test, and it split them for good. My mother, humbled and desperate, took the help. She and the advisor worked out a plan with the bank. She sold her home shopping channel jewelry, and my father sold his golf clubs. She took a part-time job cataloging books at the local library, the first job she's had since before Kevin was born. My father and Kevin, however, were incensed. Their pride couldn't handle the perceived charity, the implication that they couldn't manage their own affairs. My father refused to participate, and Kevin called me a traitor for not just giving them the cash. Today, my parents are separated. My mother rents a small, clean apartment near the library. She is quieter now, more thoughtful. We speak on the phone once a week. The conversations are often awkward, but they are real. She asks about my collections, and I ask about the books she's reading. She is slowly, painstakingly building a life of her own. Kevin couch surfs with friends, forever chasing the next big thing that never materializes. My father lives in a rented room downtown, a proud, lonely man who would rather lose his family than his ego. The justice served wasn't a punishment I enacted, but the natural consequence of their own choices, a reckoning that was long overdue. The broken shoes now sit on loan in a glass case at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, part of an exhibit called The Object as Autobiography. I visited last month. I stood there, anonymously, in the quiet, reverent hall, watching people read the little plaque beside them that told a condensed version of my story. I overheard a young woman whisper to her friend, "Wow, can you imagine having that much courage?" I almost laughed. It wasn't courage back then. It was just desperation. But I suppose, sometimes, they look the same. I have found my community, my chosen family, in the brilliant, creative minds I work with every day, in Julian's gruff wisdom and in Isabel's fierce loyalty. The gnawing emptiness that used to live in my chest, the constant, desperate need for my family's approval, has been replaced by a quiet, solid core of self-worth. It's a piece I designed and built myself, and it's more valuable than any multi-million-dollar contract. About 6 months ago, after a particularly grueling but successful launch of our spring collection, I found myself with a rare, quiet weekend. The loft was silent. The city hummed a distant lullaby, but a strange restlessness tugged at me. My new life was everything I could have dreamed of, fulfilling, creative, secure, but there was a small, unexamined corner of my past that felt unresolved. It wasn't about anger or a need for closure with my family. That chapter had been written. This was something different. It was a need to go back to the beginning, to the place where the story really started. So, on a whim, I booked a flight. I flew back to Oak Valley for the first time since I had left in a haze of adrenaline and righteous fury. I wasn't there to see the fractured remains of my family. I was there to see Maria. Walking into the Oak Valley diner was like stepping through a tear in time. Nothing had changed. The bell above the door still chimed with the same slightly off-key jingle. The air was thick with the holy trinity of diner smells: coffee, frying bacon, and the faint, clean scent of industrial bleach. The red vinyl on the booths was still cracked in the same familiar patterns, like a roadmap of every person who had ever sat there, nursing a cup of coffee and their own private story. The regulars were in their usual spots, looking a year older but otherwise identical. For a terrifying second, I felt the phantom weight of an order pad in my hand, the muscle memory of a decade spent in service to others. Then I saw her. Maria was behind the counter, her silver hair pulled back in its customary tight bun, her face a mask of fierce concentration as she tallied up receipts. She looked up as the bell chimed, and her eyes, sharp and perceptive as ever, found mine across the room. A long moment passed. Then, the corner of her mouth twitched, and a rare, wide, genuine grin spread across her face, softening the tough lines carved by 40 years in a tough business. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked around the counter. She pulled me into a hug that was awkward, brief, and smelled of bleach and home. It was one of the most honest embraces I had ever received. "Look at you, kid," she said, holding me at arm's length, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. She wasn't looking at my designer clothes or the expensive watch on my wrist. She was looking at my posture, the way I held my head. "You're a long way from the walk-in cooler." We sat in booth number 7, my old station, the one with the slight wobble that I knew how to fix with a folded napkin. She poured me a cup of coffee, black, just the way she knew I liked it. It tasted exactly the same, slightly burnt, strong, and deeply comforting. I told her everything, not the polished, media-friendly version of the story, but the real one. I told her about the terrifying loneliness of that first night in New York, the dizzying shock of Julian's revelation, the brutal therapy sessions, and the quiet, painful process of watching my family implode under the weight of their own choices. I told her about the challenges of leading a team, the immense pressure of the second collection, the fear of being a one-hit wonder, and I told her about the strange, quiet satisfaction of seeing my mother carry a library tote bag instead of a designer knockoff. Maria listened, her gaze unwavering, nodding occasionally, sipping her own coffee. She didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes or easy answers. She just held the space for my story, a silent, solid witness. When I finally fell silent, the morning sun streaming through the diner's greasy windows, she took a long sip of her coffee. "So, your mother is finally learning to be a grown-up," she said, her voice gruff. "Better late than never. And your father and brother, well, some people would rather drown than admit they can't swim." She looked at me, her expression serious. "But the question is, how are you doing? Not the famous designer. You, Alara. The girl who used to hide her sketches under the cash register." The question caught me off guard. "I'm good," I said, and was surprised to find I meant it. "I'm happy." But there's this one thing I can't shake. I hesitated, the confession feeling heavy in the familiar air of the diner. I don't know if I can ever fully forgive them. For everything. For the college money, for the years of being made to feel small, for what they tried to do that night. Is that wrong? Does that make me a bad person? Maria shook her head slowly, a faint, wry smile on her lips. Alara, you've been watching too many schmaltzy afternoon movies. Forgiveness isn't some magic pill you swallow that makes all the hurt go away. It isn't for them. It has nothing to do with letting them off the hook or pretending what they did was okay. She leaned forward, her voice dropping, becoming more intense. Forgiveness is for you. It's a selfish act. It's about you, finally. Letting go of the hope that your past could have been any different. It's about letting go of the hope that they'll ever wake up and become the people you needed them to be. Her words resonated deep within me, unlocking a truth I hadn't been able to articulate. You don't have to like what they did, she continued. You don't have to forget it. God knows. You shouldn't. You just have to decide that you're not going to let it take up any more space in your head. You're not going to let it have power over you anymore. Sounds to me like you've already done that. You stopped waiting for them to give you permission to live your life. You just started living it. And in that moment, I understood. The journey of the past year hadn't been about seeking revenge, or even justice, not really. It had been about reclaiming my own narrative. For my entire life, they had been the authors of my story. They cast me as the plain, practical, uninspired daughter, the reliable utility, the failure whose silly dreams were a source of family amusement. When I walked onto that stage in New York, I wasn't just presenting a pair of shoes. I was wresting the pen from their hands. I became the author, the editor, and the protagonist of my own life. The greatest lesson I've learned has nothing to do with the tensile strength of leather or the proper way to balance a stiletto heel. It's about worth. For 28 years, I believed my worth was something that had to be granted to me by others, specifically by my family. I worked myself to the bone trying to earn it, trying to be good enough, responsible enough, to finally deserve their love and approval. But their love was a currency I could never accumulate enough of. The truth is, my worth was never in their hands to give. It wasn't bestowed upon me by Julian Croft's golden marker. It was forged in the quiet, lonely hours in that basement. It was in every stitch I made, every sketch I drew, in the stubborn, irrational, glorious refusal to let my dream die when it had no oxygen to breathe. The world didn't give me my worth. It simply started paying attention to the worth that was there all along. The money, the loft, the acclaim, they are wonderful, life-changing gifts. But they are not the prize. The prize is the profound, unshakable peace that comes from knowing, deep in your bones, that you are enough, on your own terms. The prize is the silence in my head where their chorus of criticism used to be. As I was leaving the diner, after promising Maria I wouldn't be a stranger, I saw my mother walking down the street. She was heading home from her shift at the library, carrying a canvas tote bag overflowing with books. She looked smaller than I remembered, less formidable. Our eyes met across the road. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then, she gave me a small, hesitant wave. There was no demand in it, no expectation. It was just a wave, and I waved back. There was no surge of anger, no bitterness, not even much sadness. There was just a quiet acknowledgement of the vast distance between us, a canyon carved by years of pain, but now, finally, visible under an honest light. I had finally stopped mourning the family I wished I had and started to accept the one I actually got, with all their broken pieces and profound limitations, and I was okay with that, because I had finally, truly, built my own home not with bricks and mortar, but with boundaries and self-respect. So I want to ask you all, Have you ever had a passion that others called a silly hobby or a foolish dream? How did you find the strength to believe in yourself when the people closest to you wouldn't? I would be so honored to read your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like the underdog, please give this video a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because our community is built on stories of resilience, just like this one. Remember to share this video with anyone in your life who might need a reminder that their dreams are valid, their voice matters, and their worth is non-negotiable, no matter how broken the shoes they're walking in might seem. Thank you for listening, and may you always have the courage to pick up the pen and write your own story, even if you have to do it by candlelight in the basement.